was at that was Calvert. Yeah. Yeah. So it's the same, like Memorial Day. They made mistakes. Oh, well, no, let me say yeah. And I said that. Well, I had a big word. Need to put that in the see ocean, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're like,
Yeah.
I just it's all good. I can take all of you guys. You're, I think I have the same cycle. Really? It's like today's the last day.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming today to our lecture. This is the Hot Topics in Environmental Law lecture series that has been going on this summer and will continue through the first week of August. However, I'd like to remind people that next week we are not having any hot topics because it is the summer break week. So enjoy the holiday break, and we'll start out the week of July 11th. This is a brown bag event. Please feel free to enjoy your lunch, and if you're looking for Vermont COE credit, the sign-in sheet is by the back door, so please sign in. And we will conclude this lecture with some Q&A, so hold on to your questions till then. And it is our deep pleasure to welcome Priyanka Vora to Vermont Law School. Ms. Vora is a special correspondent with the Hindustan Times in Mumbai. She reports on topics including public health and medicine. Before joining the Hindustan Times, she worked with Midday and Free Press Journal. She has handled the public health beat, has done several news breaks. She also regularly reports on women's rights issues from the public health perspective. And she received the Reach Lilly MDR TV Partnership Award for her reporting on tuberculosis. In 2014, she was the only Indian journalist to receive the Global Health Reporting Award, administered by the International Center for Journalists, which is a US-based agency. And her work on malnutrition in urban slums received recognition for gender-sensitive reporting from Ladvi Media and Advertising Awards. She was the National Foundation for India 2015 Media Fellow for Print Journalists, researching on accessibility to healthcare for poor urban women and children. And at the Hindustan Times, Ms. Vora enters the coverage for Western India and report on several developmental issues as well as medical ethics in India. She has earned a Bachelor's of Mass Media and has also studied General LLB from Mumbai University. And she is here today because she is one of our 4 Summer Environmental Media Fellows, which means that out of a pool of about 30 to 40 applicants, she was chosen for her excellence. So please join me in welcoming Priyanka Vora.
Hi everybody. So I would just like to have a disclaimer in place that whatever I say right now doesn't echo the views of my organization. These are my personal views. So let me just get started. So I'm going to talk about this very interesting topic called climate change and Indian media. The reason I selected this topic for the hot topics this year is because the Indian media, the way it covers climate change has never been studied by anyone. There's only one research which I could put my hands to and which actually discussed about how the Indian media treats the subject of climate change. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through a lot of stories that have been done by the Indian media with regards to climate change and also stories that are done with regards to local environmental issues. Because local environmental issues and their degradation is something which the Indian media is now focusing on and is creating a lot of impact. So to start with, I would like to tell you all why India matters. Now, suddenly it's a journalist from India standing here and we're discussing about India. So why India matters? Because of a lot of issues. First thing is India's population is 1.03 billion. The population density is 446 people per square kilometer. That's huge, right? So the more the people, the more consumption, the more consumption, the more production, the more manufacturing. And all these are triggers for climate change. Another very important thing is that you have seen the Paris Conventions and the conventions prior to that. India has played a major role. It was a major player when it comes to the debate on climate change. So, and another very important thing is just look at the line there. That's pretty interesting and it's making a lot of headlines in India right now because the Make in India campaign. So our current Prime Minister wants lots and lots of factories to come down and invest in India, manufacture in India, grow in India, and we want to shift from the agrarian model to the industrial model. So, the Make in India campaign. Now, the Make in India campaign sounds great for the voters because obviously they're going to get more money, they're going to get more jobs, a better standard of living. But that is again comes to the same cycle, the more the production, more consumption, again a threat to climate change. So, another major thing that one needs to understand that India is an emerging economy. A very important statistics by the World Bank forecast that India will be the fastest growing large economy until 2018. The same thing, more production, more consumption threats to climate change. Another important thing is India is a major greenhouse gas emitter. If you see China, US, European Union, I don't know if Brexit, what happens to that, but then India. So India, at least 7% of the total greenhouse gas emissions are from India, which is not a small number. And these numbers are only going to go up with the more industrialization that we're looking to. Now, India has to worry something because of the location that India has. Geographically, India is vulnerable because of the Himalaya-South Asia mega delta. It is highly vulnerable to the effects of climate change. There is a change in the monsoon patterns. There is a change in the sea level rise, and all these things are something that we need to worry about. So I'm going to talk about it ahead, but very important thing is that the things that the developed nations do, I'm not pointing to anyone, but the developed nations and their growth has a detrimental effect on the economies and on the effects of climate change on the developing world. Now, this is something which is something that I can talk about because as a journalist, I've been covering public health, environment for the past 8 years now. I was a journalist since I was 18 years, so I'm almost like I was born into journalism. So a very important thing is that media not only influences public opinion, it shapes public opinion. Now both these sentences look very similar to me. Why? Because influencing and shaping mean the same thing, but they're not. So when I write a report and a person, a reader over here would read the report, he will understand it, he will comprehend it, and he will form an opinion based on my report. So I'm influencing his opinion. At the same time, if the opinion that my article has is not the opinion that the reader holds, he or she will think of fitting into that public opinion because everyone wants to fit into the opinion of the masses. So in that context, I will be shaping his public opinion. So influencing public opinion and shaping public opinion is a very, very important, a pivotal role that the Indian media or media anywhere in the world plays. Now, I would like to focus on the picture here. There was a terror attack, the 26/11 terror attack in Mumbai, where a lot of few terrorists came down and gunned down a lot of people. I will not get into statistics, but the way the media covered it, there was live coverage of a terror attack. There was live coverage of commandos killing terrorists, terrorists killing civilians, and this created public opinion. This is the first time when a large number of people, like it's a large country, so even a few people becomes a large number of people. So a lot of people made it to the streets to protest against the terror attacks. There was no formal announcement. There was no formal group which was saying, okay, come together to protest. It was just that, okay, I am going there to protest, are you coming along? And there was a huge protest. This is a picture of one of the protests. And this is why I say the role of media is very important because it influences and it shapes public opinion. Now what happens if the media is not well informed? Media, if any person is not well informed, if I do not understand the subject I'm writing on, I'm bound to make mistakes, right? And if I make mistakes, my articles, my reports are going to have mistakes, and these mistakes are going to be read by people. There could be some people who would understand the mistakes and would say, okay, it's a trashy article. But there could be a large number of people who are laymen, who probably don't understand the subject well, and they will not be informed properly. So a poor coverage leads to poor understanding. And that is where the role of you people comes into picture. You know, as experts from academia, it's very important that you create a dialogue with media personnel and make them understand what you're talking about. Like if you're talking about the food security or if you're talking about right to food, you have to explain the importance of these issues to the media person. Only then, when the media person is reporting on the issue which is related to it, will understand the significance and will write about it in a more sensitive and a more responsible way. Now, how the media world over treats climate change? It looks at climate change as a social environmental issue. It does not look at climate change as a scientific process. Now, I think this is the failure of the scientific community. I would not say this is the failure of the media personnel. I have to be told, right? A media person is someone who knows how to write, who knows how to report, but is not a researcher. So maybe our researchers need to understand that they need to create some kind of toolkit or kind of understanding so that the reporters understand that it is just not a social environmental issue, it is also a scientific process. Now, this is something which I am really interested to talk about, that media reflects elite perception. With due respect to all the organizations that I've worked with. But when it comes to reporting, if there is a fire in a swanky neighborhood, it will get the front page. If there is a fire in a slum, it will get page 8 of the newspaper. Now the reason is because we think that the people who read our newspapers are people who are rich, people who are literate, and why do we do that? Because we want advertisers, right? A newspaper, if everyone is aware, most newspapers function on the model of advertising, where you have an advertiser who advertises in your newspaper, you get money from him, and you pay your employees and you run the show. But by doing so you want to tell your advertiser that your paper is read by the rich and the literate and the elite, and therefore you will only, as a newspaper, play subjects which the elite likes. So if there is an issue of urban poor issue where there is environmental degradation happening in slums, sanitation issue. In a slum, you would probably not write about it because it does not fit your elite perception model. So here, it plays a major role that media tends to reflect, it romanticizes subject which the elite likes, it writes about it, but at the minute the elite stops, our elite is not interested in it, it will stop worrying about it. Now let's get to the Indian media where I come from. So we have a lot of languages, so 30 languages newspaper, more than that I'm sure. And there are 4 major newspapers. So the top one is Hindustan Times where I come from, the Times of India, the Hindu, the Indian Express. So all these 4 major newspapers have been covering climate change, have been covering issues of environmental degradation. But I'm sorry to say, but that none of these newspapers have a senior member in their editorial board who has a backing of environmental issues, or like someone who has covered environmental issues in there. You would find a political editor, you would find a lifestyle editor on the editorial board, but you would never find a person who has covered science, a person who has covered environment on the editorial board of these newspapers. And that is something we need to worry about because that affects the choice of the news that is played in the newspaper. So just to give you a brief what happens, in the newsroom, I think most of the people must have seen that sitcom. So you come together, you sit and you discuss what is going to go on the front page, what is going to go on the page 2, what is going to go on page 3. And while discussing that, if the senior member does not have an inclination towards environment issues, does not have an inclination towards climate change, these news are going to get buried. And this means there will be poor coverage, something that I told you earlier. And a poor coverage will lead to poor information among the masses. Now, we have to understand why I'm focusing more on newspaper. I could have shown you channels, but for one thing, because I am a newspaper person, and secondly, there was a very interesting study which said that print media is a major source of information for people in India. At least 74% of the people surveyed in one of these surveys that I looked up, the primary source of information for climate change is print media. It is very funny, when we talk about climate change, the news channels would probably tend to show melting glaciers and floods and drought conditions, but they would not talk about the scientific process involved, which is probably again the failure of the entire community, because we are probably not telling our reporters that why does this happen. We can see a glacier melting, okay, but what are the implications of this? Someone has to tell this to the reporters. Now, video time. So I'm going to show you this video and I have a quick question after that. Okay, the cute leopard. Okay, so is anyone from the audience can tell me where do you think this place is? Like, is it some forest? Is it some
Sanctuary?
wildlife sanctuary? Yeah, so it's not a wildlife sanctuary. It's in the middle of the city where I come from. It's the most populous city in India. It's called Mumbai. And in the middle of the city, this particular map that you see here, this is the map of Mumbai, and the red circle there, that's the green mass, or we call them the green lungs of the city. So inside this, we have these leopards. We don't have a number to it, that how many leopards live there, because leopards keep on, they don't have a fixed territory, they keep on traveling. But there is leopard activity in this particular zone of Mumbai. So there are a lot of man-animal conflicts that happen. But why I'm talking about this today is because of a newspaper campaign. As I told you, I will talk about some local issues. So here, you need to understand this place is called RA. So RA is a green lung of Mumbai, and they want to chop this entire forest land and create a metro car shed. Now the reason they want to do it is because all the other place, the white space there is full of construction activities. Already it's occupied. So what we need to do is, we want to take off this green lungs and create a car shed for the new development of a metro line. So this is what I call as cost to development. I would like to say, I was having a discussion with a friend, and we were talking about, okay, growth, environment, and she's like, you're too environment person. So, there were trees, that there was a lot of forest earlier, forest has been chopped down, and then people are still surviving. So the man will understand and will adapt to less forest or less trees and less environment. Maybe we will be able to survive with the concrete jungle. So I said, that's not fair, and then we got into an argument, and then she said, Priyanka, you have to understand, there is a cost to development. If you are developing, you have a cost to pay for it, and that cost is this green lungs. So my city is saying that we need to chop this green lungs because we need to develop, and we are going to cut the forest down. I think 75 acres of land will be cut down so that you can have a metro car share. So the video that I showed you earlier, that was shot by a reporter. Now that's what I like about journalism. Sometimes journalism enters into the activism mode. So it's not a good thing. They say that a journalist should never be an activist, but here the reporter realized that what should I do? How can I convince the people that this is an important patch of forest? We need it for for a sustainable living. And so he decided to get some camera traps from his own money, not that his organization funded. He got his camera traps from his own money, laid them down in this forest patch, went in the night, laid them down, and got these great videos and images, and did a newspaper campaign called Save Our. So what he did was, the newspaper is called Midday. It's the oldest tabloid in the city, and the reporter is Ranjit. And they did a story about, this is quite interesting. So if you look here, hey MMRDA, RA is a forest and it has leopards, here's the proof. So he actually went beyond the call of his duty, got the pictures in place, got the videos in place, and did a story of telling the government and the people that there are leopards here. It is a very eco-sensitive zone and you cannot get rid of it. The best part is this, the impact. So the chief minister, Devendra Fadnavis, that is the chief minister of the state that I belong to, said that the metro shift will need to be shifted to prevent the green loss. So that's the kind of impact newspaper campaigns can have. And while doing so, I don't know how many reporters would be so self-motivated by like this reporter. So what we need to do is, as a community, sensitize reporters about issues of environmental degradation. And if we do that, they will understand the importance and the implications of public policies. So out of 9 out of 10 reporters actually thought that it's okay, we are having a new metro car share, there will be less, it will be easier for people to travel, it will be convenient. But he thought of a different opinion, he thought of a different view, and he realized that getting rid of the forest patch today means a lot of environmental degradation for the next 10 years. Now, this is something I want to talk about, and with due respect to everyone in the room, climate colonialism. Everyone in India thinks that, I would say I wouldn't know what everyone in India thinks, but the popular opinion is that most developed countries want India to not progress. They want India's growth to be arrested. And so they are saying that, okay, stall your growth, you are polluting the environment, you are polluting, and therefore that is something which is what people in my part of the world say climate colonialism. So the current climate negotiations have been speaking about this term climate colonialism. There's a very important body, agency in India, which keeps on talking about this term climate colonialism, the Center for Science and Environment. So, which is a major source provider for reporters in India. So it's an attempt on the part of the developed world to arrest India's growth. What is happening? It is pushing poor countries for the act of the, it is punishing poor countries for the act of the rich. So if the rich have developed and they don't want us to develop, is what people think, and therefore they're telling us you are polluting the globe and stop manufacturing, stop producing. So there was this very important statement that I found out. While the developed world is largely responsible for climate disruptions, it is the developing world that primarily experiences the impacts and most acutely. So this statement says it all. It's trying to say that even if the developed world pollutes, the developing world is at the end of facing a lot of consequences. Then even if the developing world is polluting, what happens or is responsible for climate change? India is going to be affected because of the geographical locations. The glaciers are going to melt. The sea level is going to rise. There is going to be monsoon disruptions. Now, the normative assumptions. This is a very interesting research that was done by Simon Willis, and it spoke about how people perceive climate change in the Indian media. So it is something which says that it is trying to suppress India's growth. The entire idea of carbon footprints and everything is all about arresting India's growth and the developing world's growth. So the developed world wants to have restrictive policies so that the developing world does not grow. It's a nationalistic reaction. It's not something which I'm saying or which a few people are saying. A lot of people. So I was telling you about the Make in India campaign at the start, where the current Prime Minister wants industries to grow. So here, they are trying to say that if we don't grow, the reason the developed world does not want us to grow is because they don't want us to develop. They don't want us from becoming a developed economy, because we are going to be a threat to them if we become a developed economy. And therefore, there is non-compliance. So the policymakers think that it's not a good idea. The policymakers think it's climate colonialism. The people think it's climate colonialism. So why would anyone believe, and why would anyone be a signatory to all the pacts that we want them to sign? Now, this is a very interesting research, Simon Willis research here. So it talks about Union Press endorses climate change as a scientific reality, which is a good thing. And what he did was he looked at the articles that were done in a particular period, and he saw that 98% were linked to anthropogenic causes, which is a good thing. Now, this particular chart here is very interesting. So the Times of India, the Hindu, the Indian Express, and Hindustan Times. So of all the articles, 91% of the articles done by Times of India with regards to climate change, the responsibility for climate change rests with the developed countries, that is not. So the perception in all the articles was that the responsibility for climate change is with the North. The similar is the situation with Hindu, with 53% of the articles talking about the same opinion. 82% of the articles done by Indian Express again echoed the same view, and similar is with the Hindustan Times, where 71% of the articles spoke about the same view, that it is the responsibility of the North and we have nothing to do with it. Now, these are some headlines to discuss. So why I'm talking about it is because we always, the perception is climate change is covered only when there's a major summit happening somewhere, people discussing, the Prime Minister is saying something, but what happens locally? So there's this interesting 2 articles that I found out, and this said that climate change is delaying rainfall in the state, says IMD. So the local meteorological department says climate change is causing disruptions in rainfall, and the other article says that India is considering an umbrella legislation on climate change. So both these articles were extensive, big articles. They got a lot of space, but as I said, they did not make it to the front page. Now, why India should be worried? This is it's a telling picture. I don't need to say anything. This is a lady, a woman is collecting water from a dried up water tank at a village in Andhra Pradesh. This is the situation right now. The drought is killing a lot of people there. So India should be worried because of the falling agricultural output, there is monsoon disruptions, there are floods that are happening, and there is a drought situation. Now, this is something which I did before coming to the United States. I was in some rural parts of Maharashtra. So I did a story about kidney ailments plague water-starved villages. So the drought in the place where I come from, Maharashtra, is for the 3rd consecutive year. This is the 3rd year in a row where they have not received rainfall. People are, so here, instead of just saying that, okay, there is no water and there's no food security, I went a step ahead and I looked at how it's affecting the health of individuals. So because of drinking water rich with minerals, because of the water table is depleting, people have to dig deeper and deeper. And the more deeper you go, the water is full of minerals. And when you drink such water, you are bound to develop what the scientists or what the doctors call as calcification process, and your kidneys develop these stones. So I met doctors who are seeing at least 20, 30 patients in a day who have developed kidney stones, and there are no other risk factors. The only risk factor is they're drinking such water. And now who is responsible? It is the responsibility of the state to provide clean, hygienic drinking water that does not make people ill. So kidney ailments arise, heat stroke deaths are happening. So health and climate change. Now this is something which this is a topic that interests me the most. So it impacts the impact on the lives of people. So here the climate change drought was impacting the lives of people. People are developing kidney ailments, and this is very important. Another decade or so, we are going to see a rise in number of people who develop kidney failures. How are we going to sustain? How are we going to provide them the treatment? How are we going to provide them with so many kidney transplants? So we have to look for all that. Another important thing which a lot of doctor friends of mine tell me is the change in the weather habits. Like the example is the Zika virus. So Zika virus suddenly found its place in Brazil. So we are trying to understand why it happens, what. So I'm not saying that I know why it happened, but I'm saying that a lot of these viruses and bacteria are not restricting, like Ebola. It's not restricting to one continent where it lived for so many years. It is shifting from one place to another. And climate change might have a role to play in that. Another thing is affect the disease epidemiology. As I said, a particular section of the world is immune to a particular disease, which might not be the same anymore because the vector habitat is changing. The virus and the bacteria are learning how to survive in different temperatures. The change in the temperatures in different parts of the country is making it easier for vectors and viruses to live in that particular area. So I did this another story which said that you pay the price of pollution. Now, we looked at how there was a very interesting group of researchers who looked at the cost of pollution that a person pays. That is the wages lost, the amount of money that they're putting in treatment. India does not have a universal universal insurance scheme, so people have out of pocket or have their own personal insurances. So in 2008, in 2008, here, it's 13.49 millions, and the number has gone up to 16.50. That is 22.9% change in the amount of money people are spending or people are losing to pollution. Now, we are trying to make more money. We are trying to attract industries and ask them to come and have manufacturing processes here so that people can have more money, people can have employment. But what about this? We are losing money somewhere. We can just save money and make sure that the economy is doing well. So saving is not something that we're looking at. We're trying to make more money. Now, this is somewhere where I also stumble a lot of time. The challenges that a reporter faces when they write about climate change. The first thing is access to scientific literature, especially in India. It's very difficult to access scientists. Because of the entire hierarchy system that exists. It's very difficult to get in touch with those scientists and say, okay, I'm writing about this, can you help me with this? Like, okay, you need to speak to my dean, you need to get this permissions, and things never work out because reporters are working on a deadline. So there is information probably available and I'm unable to access them because of a hierarchy, which is pretty bad. Lack of experts. Now, you would probably not have experts about every subject in India. And it is difficult for every reporter in India to probably reach out to someone in the United States or in Europe for a particular subject or particular topic. And they might not be relevant to the Indian context. They might be they might be experts on the subject, but they might probably not have the same exposure for Indian context. So you will not be able to use them. Non-scientific background. Now, even though I cover public health and I cover environment, I don't have a science background. I have a media background. I have a law background. So none of these reporters, a person who's covering health is not a doctor. So a person who is talking to these reporters should understand that you have to break down things and you have to make it easier for the reporters to understand. So there's better coverage and better understanding. And lack of training. No one wants to spend on training. So no media organizations will train their reporters, and that's why these programs are very important. So for 2 weeks for me to come here, it is very interesting because I'm going to learn a lot, and that is a kind of training, and I'm going to help my colleagues to understand what I'm doing. So these are the kind of training programs that media organizations should undertake. and the will of the media house. I'm going to spend a little time on this. Organizations, as I told you earlier, advertising revenue is very important, without which our salaries won't come in. So the will of the media house. So if the person who owns the media house feels that climate change is not an important topic, you can't do anything about it. You are then left with no choice but write about everything else other than climate change. So maybe Bollywood is more important, maybe things like that are more important, and climate change is not. So here again, the role of academia comes in. Make climate change an important topic. Make everyone realize that this is something you cannot live without. You will have to write about it. Another important story, it's about the garbage and the financial capital. I like to call it that because this is a very beautiful picture. This is Mumbai skyline, comparable to New York. And so this is the kind of garbage that the skyline creates, or the skyline is responsible for. So we do not have a proper dumping waste segregation system in Mumbai. So we have one, but it doesn't really do well. So this particular place, Devna, caught fire, and all the toxic, or there was a lot of smog. For that one particular week, the PM 2.5 levels in the city went skyrocketed. And so around 9,400 tons of waste is generated daily in Mumbai. Now, we don't know what to do with this waste. So we are going and dumping it at a particular place. We are incinerating this waste, but what is happening is a poor garbage disposal system. And by burning this, when there was this fire, the PM 2.5 levels increased, the number of people who have a pre-existing illness like a lung disease, like a chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder, asthma, they were having a bad time. So we did an article about, this is again an article that I did, segregate trash or suffer, doctors want. So if you don't segregate your trash, we don't even have a system where we wet garbage and dry garbage. We don't even segregate it at that level. Even if we did that, it would help us to avoid such incidents. So during that period, there was, as I said, there was an increase in pollutant levels, there is a rise in number of people having lung ailments. So what is the way forward? I would say Hindustan Times, the place that I come from, the place that I write, is doing a great work by having this weekly column called Green Heroes. What they do is they recognize or they identify people. They could be scholar students, it could be a housewife, it could be a bunch of senior citizens who are doing something for the environment. And every week we find such people in the city and we report about them. So we encourage them. At the same time, by reading this, other people would understand what can be done, like how do you compost, how do you segregate your waste, how do you use, how do you get rid of plastic, how do you live a plastic-free life. So things like that. So this is something which I am very proud of. I think it's a great initiative, and so it's only Hindustan Times that does that. I would expect all other organizations to do something similar. Now the last part, as because we are a class of lawyers here and law experts, so I thought from my very little knowledge that I have about judiciary, I'll speak about judicial activism. Now, in India, everything is corrupt, everyone says everything is corrupt, but I have a lot of respect for the judiciary because judiciary in the last few decades has played a very important role in safeguarding the environment. So this one thing that they have done is they have broadened the scope of locus standi. So usually I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you can file a case in India only if it is your violation of the right, like your personal violation of right is happening, you can go and file a petition. But what happens if the rights of the community are being violated together? So it has broadened the scope of locus standi, and it has allowed and has entertained petitions which are called as public interest litigations. So these are then converted into writ petitions. So if any rights are being violated which are there in the Constitution, you could go to the Supreme Court or you can go to the High Court under Article 32 or 226 of the Constitution of India, and you could file a public interest litigation and say, okay, this is not something which is affecting me, it's affecting the environment, and I want the Supreme Court to take cognizance of the situation. So there were these two very major landmark cases which I would like to discuss. The first is the Ganga pollution case. There were three landmark judgments. The man behind this is MC Mehta. He is a rock star of environmental law in India. He files this interesting petitions and everyone wants to read them, and he's done a great job. So there were three landmark judgments. So I'll tell you what happened. So Ganga is actually a river which has a lot of religious significance. People say if you go to the Ganga and if you dip yourself in, you will get rid of all your sins. That's how they talk about it. And that is the river which is being polluted like this. So that's a real picture. So there were three landmark judgments which were passed. The court said, okay, nothing doing. All those industries which were there on the banks of the river were not treating their waste, and they were just leaving, letting their waste go off in the river. There were tanneries which were there, which were again secreting their waste into the river. So what the court did is it passed three landmark judgments. It asked 250 towns were ordered to put sewage plants. Around 600 tanneries were shifted out of the city of Kolkata, which were the major reasons for pollution, and several industries were asked to shut down. Now, it takes a lot of efforts for the judiciary to say, okay, industries will shut down, because when industries shut down, people lose employment for that particular period. So people get affected. There are protests that's going to happen. But the judiciary took a stand for the environment, which is why I say judicial activism is something which other countries should learn from India. Another very important case. So the rock star is here, MC Mehta. He's there. So MC Mehta versus Kamal Nath. Now I specifically chose this case we discussed because this talks about corruption. This talks about the will of the judiciary. And in my talk description, I said that can you change the course of the river for the sake of development? We can't. No one should be allowed to. So here, MC Mehta filed a case against Kamal Nath. He was actually the environment minister at that point of time. And his family owned a motel. And that particular motel was trying to change the course of the river so that it beautifies their own motel. So it looks pretty. So MC Mehta went to the court, filed a case, and the court was interested. The court again looked at the public trust doctrine. This is the doctrine where it's not affecting you again. You're broadening the scope of local standard, and you are trying to safeguard the environment. And the most important thing is the polluter's pay principle was applied. So here, exemplary damages. So the polluter had to pay. So the Kamal Nath had to pay some amount, a huge amount at that point of time, to the government for the damages he had done to the environment. Now I just end the conversation with this last thing. This is another rock star, Justice C.N. Bhagwati. He has been on a lot of these cases. He has been one of the judges, and he was in Colombia a few months ago or years ago. He says that life means not only physical existence, it means the use of every limb or faculty through which life is enjoyed. The right to life includes the right to a healthy environment. So they have said that right to life includes the right to a healthy environment. Thank you so much. Do you all have questions? That's a good thing. Yeah.
It's very disappointing to hear that the climate agenda is viewed as a colonial agenda. I understand why that is true,
Right.
but I'm sure that people who know more about it than I do would say, well, what we want to encourage is that you do not repeat the mistakes that we made. That you avoid the development with coal, and instead you leap forward to renewables. And I'm just wondering how, and I would think that the perception you laid out would be very counterproductive. It
Yes.
would be undermine support for action on climate. So I'm wondering how the world at large in the United States can help alter the perception in India about what the climate agenda signifies for India and its people.
Right. I think that's an interesting take, because what I believe is that the climate colonialism comes on from, it's a historic thing, it's not something which we have made up. So what we're looking at is most developed countries are trying to arrest India's growth. The only way developed countries can help is by giving what they have. So the knowledge sharing that is required, which is probably not happening on the international levels because of a lot of political agenda. So if the knowledge sharing happens, if say a developed world helps the developing world to grow in a sustainable way, it would be useful. But again, there is a lot of political interventions, a lot of international issues that we need to deal with. But I think as a scientific community at a very lower level, we need to create this kind of, we write papers and write articles about how climate change is a reality and how it does not affect, like it is not something that the developed world did and then now the developing world will also do it just because you did something wrong, I also have the right to do something wrong. So that perception needs to change, and for that we need more kind of, I think things need to come from academia, things need to come from scientists about explaining that even if we pollute, we are the ones who are going to pay. So the kind of articles that we're doing, I think we are trying to say that pollution, you are paying for that. If you don't segregate your waste, you are paying for that. If you are going to chop off the green lungs, you are going to pay for that. So by doing that, we are in a very subtle way telling the people that climate change is a reality and you cannot say that it's not going to affect you today. It might affect you tomorrow. Any more questions? Yeah.
I wanted to challenge one of the ideas you presented, mostly to help me understand the situation in India and here in the West a little bit better. But you mentioned that it was the perception or the general notion, or at least your hypothesis, that the developed world does not want India to further develop, to get ahead. I understand the argument why. I would make the counter argument based on what little I know, that the US and Europe, they want to sell a lot of products and services to India, which will help India become more like the US and Europe. One specific example, in Pune, there's perhaps the world's most sophisticated and advanced waste segregation and collection system, and it's entirely human-driven. There's no machinery involved, but there's a friction between the waste pickers union and the municipality. The municipality has is influenced by business interests that want to bring in these so-called new waste technologies, which are really just Europe and the US's technologies from 20 or 30 years ago that we're trying to get rid of, but which in the minds of many middle-class Indians might seem more modern. So what would be your response to that?
Interesting question. So Pune is very close to where I live. So I think what we need to understand here is there are dynamics of every country. So there is corruption, which is a major problem in India. So as you just rightly pointed out, there are a lot of influences that happen. And therefore, a new technology to enter into the market, it takes a lot of time. So only a technology where the person who is getting the technology is going to get some money, only that kind of technology will probably enter the market. So I understand what you're saying. What we need to do is, we need to figure out a way in which we can allow knowledge share, as I said earlier. The thing is, that's the problem. What people think is, as you said, that a technology which is there in Europe or US 30 years ago, which is probably something which is obsolete now, is now being shared to India. This is not what needs to be done. What needs to be done is the most advanced technologies which the developed world has needs to be shared with the developing world. Only then probably they will have that kind of a trust factor, so that they will feel that okay, we need to do a sustainable development and need to be on renewables and not just make the mistakes which the developed world did. Have I answered your question?
Yes, you have provided an answer, but what I'm curious about is why you would want any sort of improvement, so-called improvement, on top of what exists in Pune already, which is arguably much more effective and much.
That's typically India, The thing is, it's on record, but yeah, let me say this off the record. But it happens that only when you buy something, you have the chance of making money. So only when a politician is going to bring in a new project, he's going to make some money out of it. So because of this entire money-motivated and money-driven economy and the money-driven politics that we have, we tend to ask for new things. So like the metro car share. there's a major industrial house which is involved in the car shed. So the reason they want to do it is not just because for the convenience of the people. It's not a project just to help people. It's a project so that a lot of people in the government machinery will get rich. So that's a cultural thing, I would say. I don't know how to get rid of that. A lot of people are trying to.
I'm sorry, I wrote a paper in grad school probably over a decade ago now about biogas technology and its implications for rural India. And I'm wondering if you know of any, if that's been progressing. So taking a lot of the rural villages would be using the cow dung
Yes.
and wood, and that's getting just the multiple issues there with the time involved to search for it, and then the open burning in the home causing respiratory issues as well as adding to climate change.
Right.
So I was wondering if that's something that's been taken off the technology sharing to get these community biogas systems set up.
It is something which is developing, but it's developing at a snail's pace. The thing is, as I said, it's simple that you can take from this question, where there's no money involved. So when you do biogas, you don't have the chance of getting more technology and getting money. So people are interested in projects which means buying and selling and things like that. So when something is very homegrown, they don't have respect for what's going on, which we can develop in our own backyard. So that is something, that's where the sustainable living part comes into it. So we are not focused on sustainable living. Any more questions?
All right, thank you so much.